The moment I walked into the restaurant, I knew something was off. It was too quiet, too polite, the kind of silence people use when they're waiting for someone to trip and already rehearsing their laughter. Grandma's 80th was supposed to be a simple family dinner. A long table, string lights, her favorite lemon cake. But as I walked toward the empty seat at the end, the only one left, I felt it. Eyes on me, like knives waiting for permission to be drawn. I hadn't seen most of them in nearly 2 years. Not since I cut contact. No dramatic blowout. No screaming match. Just a clean break after years of emotional manipulation, backhanded jabs, and being the family's punching bag disguised as a sensitive one. But I came tonight for Grandma, because she had never been cruel, never called me a failure, never rolled her eyes when I said I wanted more than the life they all settled into like quicksand. She greeted me first, hugged me too long, whispered, "I'm glad you came." I smiled. I wouldn't miss it. Then I saw my sister, Chloe. Same smug expression, same sleek hair and surgically perfect smirk. She didn't wave. She didn't even blink. Just leaned back in her chair like she'd already won something I hadn't even entered. Dinner moved slowly. Stiff conversation. Glasses clinking over bad stories. Then, just as dessert was being served, Chloe cleared her throat. "Before we dive into Grandma's cake," she said, "I have a little something to share." She pulled out a manila folder and tapped it on the table. "Since our dear Sabrina has been telling everyone about her amazing new life, her business, her big new success, I thought we'd take a moment to fact-check." Laughter. A few gasps. Dad chuckled into his napkin. My uncle leaned forward, hungry for drama. Chloe grinned like a woman who'd waited months for this moment. I hired a private investigator. Actually, two, just to see if all her stories added up. She looked directly at me. I mean, what kind of sister would I be if I didn't protect the family from fantasy? I didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just stared at her while she handed the folder to Grandma. Grandma's hands trembled as she opened it. First page a header. Second page, a line of bold print. She read it. Her lips parted. She flipped the page again, and then her face changed. Not with confusion, not with embarrassment, with shock. She passed the folder silently to my father. His mouth tightened. He looked at Chloe, then at me, and for the first time in my life, he looked afraid. Chloe's smile began to crack, because the truth was written in black and white, but not my truth, hers. My name is Sabrina Lane, and from wherever you're watching this video, stay with me, because some lies come dressed as questions, but when the answers land on the table, they don't just ruin dinner, they burn the whole house down. Some people think betrayal comes loud, like slamming doors or screaming matches. But in my family, betrayal came with birthday cards signed, "Love you anyway." It came with compliments that doubled as warnings. "Wow, you really pulled that off. I didn't think you would. You're doing better than I expected. That's great. Just don't get cocky. You've always been emotional. It's hard for people like you to succeed." My sister, Chloe, was the architect of most of it. Polished, controlled, polite, even when she was cutting you in half. She always knew how to smile while she swung. I was the opposite. Sensitive, earnest, always trying to prove I belonged at the table, not because they told me I did, but because they made me believe I had to earn it. I remember once in high school I got into a writing program out of state. I was thrilled. Chloe glanced at the acceptance letter and said, "You really want to go that far just to write about your feelings?" My mom laughed. "She's creative, honey. Let her dream while she can." That was the pattern. Every ambition met with a smirk. Every boundary seen as betrayal. Every success something they either minimized or tried to claim for themselves. When I finally left, not physically but emotionally, it wasn't explosive. It was quiet. One day I just stopped replying. To the group chats. To the guilt-laced calls. To the messages that weren't really questions but traps. I started a new life in a new city. I worked 3 jobs to stay afloat. I launched a handmade goods brand out of a 1-bedroom apartment with no heat and a cracked window. I didn't tell them about any of it, and that's what burned Chloe the most. Not that I failed, but that I might have succeeded without her watching. She didn't reach out when I disappeared from the family thread. She didn't check in when I missed Thanksgiving or Christmas. But when I posted a soft announcement months later, a photo of my small studio, a little gold plaque that read founder and maker, she messaged me within minutes. "Cute. Hope it's real." I didn't answer. And from that moment on, I knew. She wasn't curious. She wasn't worried. She was threatened. Because in our family, the only way to win was to be the one with the story that stuck. And now she had hired people, literal strangers, to rip mine apart. She wasn't just trying to catch me in a lie. She was trying to drag me back into the silence I had finally escaped. But she didn't understand one thing. When you cut someone quietly, don't be surprised when they heal louder than you expected. The first night I slept in my car, I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself it was just temporary. A bump in the road. A detour. Not a destination. It was January. My breath fogged up the windows. I wrapped my coat around me twice and shoved a sweatshirt under my head like a pillow. No one knew. Not my parents. Not Chloe. Not the friends who liked every filtered photo I still posted to keep up appearances. If I had told them, I knew what I'd hear. "Why'd you move without a job?" You always make things harder than they need to be. Well, this is what happens when you chase pipe dreams. So I told no one. I found a job at a diner, then another at a bookstore, then a third cleaning offices at night. I slept between shifts, ate soup from dollar cans, pitched my business idea to myself while mopping floors at 2 a.m. I designed my first product on a borrowed laptop at a public library. My second on the bathroom floor of the studio, I finally scraped together enough to rent. No furniture, just a mattress and one plate. And when I launched my shop, I cried over the first order like it was a lottery ticket. Because to me it was. But through all of that, every scar I stitched quietly, every small win I celebrated in silence. Not one person in my family called to ask how I was doing. They didn't ask, because they didn't want to know. As long as I stayed quiet, they could imagine the worst. That I was failing, that I regretted leaving. That without them, I was nothing. They needed that narrative, and I gave it to them for a while, because silence is a strange kind of shield. It hides your pain and their guilt. So when Chloe saw me posting curated glimpses, a glowing storefront window, handwritten thank you notes from customers, quiet Sunday mornings in a space I built with my bare hands, she didn't ask how I got there. She decided it wasn't real, because if it was, it meant she had spent her whole life mocking the one person who had done what she never could. Leave. Rebuild. Thrive. And now, she was trying to expose me as a fraud. But what she didn't realize was that the life she thought was fake was the only thing in our family that had ever been real. The email came from an old coworker. Subject line: "You didn't hear this from me." Inside was a single sentence: "Chloe's asking questions about you, and not the kind people ask with love." Attached was a screenshot, a text thread between Chloe and a guy she once dated. He worked at a boutique PI agency downtown. She was asking for a full background sweep on me. I read it 3 times, then closed my laptop and made tea. Because when people go digging in the dark, they forget something. They don't get to control what surfaces. I didn't panic. Why would I? My life wasn't curated, it was carved. I had tax forms, receipts, LLC filings, shipping logs, vendor contracts, published interviews. I built this life with splinters in my fingers and silence in my lungs. But Chloe didn't know that. To her, I was still the girl who crumbled easily, who cried when Dad made jokes about real jobs, who said sorry too often for taking up space at the table. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to stop the investigation. I was going to help it. I dropped subtle posts on social, never lies, just breadcrumbs. A photo of me outside the business registration office, a tagged image with one of my investors at a networking event, a clip from a podcast interview where I talked about starting from zero. I even updated my LinkedIn. Let her follow the trail. But what I didn't post, what I didn't say, was what I knew about her. Because here's the thing. When you grow up in a house built on secrets, you learn to pay attention. I knew Chloe lied about her master's degree. I knew she padded her resume, said she worked at a nonprofit that doesn't exist anymore. I knew she funneled money from our father's consulting business to cover credit card debt, then blamed it on a clerical error. And if the investigators were really doing their job, they wouldn't just be looking at me. They'd be looking at her too. I didn't have to fight. Didn't have to scream or confront or confess. I just had to stay still, because Chloe had set a trap and never realized she was the one standing in the middle of it. It's strange how paper can silence a room. The manila folder Chloe slapped onto the table didn't look like much, but the way she smiled at it, like it was a weapon she couldn't wait to unsheath, said everything. I thought we deserved some truth tonight, she announced. The air in the restaurant shifted. A few people sat straighter. My uncle actually grinned. My mother glanced down at her plate, already pretending she wasn't involved. Chloe slid the folder toward Grandma like she was dealing cards. I hired 2 investigators, she said. Just wanted to be sure our little success story here, she nodded at me, wasn't too good to be true. The table tensed. Eyes shifted to me. I didn't blink, didn't flinch, just leaned back and watched. Grandma opened the folder with her usual grace, even though her fingers trembled slightly. First page, a copy of my business license. Stamped, verified, clean. Second page, screenshots of my e-commerce dashboard, revenue, growth charts, customer testimonials, a note from one of the PIs that read, confirmed, LLC status active, taxes filed, no signs of fraud or exaggeration. Grandma looked up at me, slowly, and nodded once. Small but powerful. Chloe's smile was still there but twitching. She leaned in. Keep going. So Grandma did. Third page. Photos. Not of me. Of Chloe. In an office that didn't match the nonprofit she claimed to work for. A copy of her resume highlighted, annotated with phrases like no record of degree completion and non-existent organization. Fourth page. Bank transaction records. Transfers from Dad's consulting firm directly into an unregistered personal account under Chloe's name. The air changed, the kind of silence that presses into your bones. Grandma's hands froze on the page. My father went pale. My mother's fork hit her plate. And Chloe? She reached for the folder. Okay, this wasn't supposed to. Someone messed up. No one messed up, I said quietly. She looked at me, eyes wide. I met her stare. Calm. Steady. You wanted truth, remember? My uncle cleared his throat, murmured something under his breath. Grandma pushed the folder toward the center of the table. Then she turned to me and placed her hand gently over mine. I always knew, she whispered. I didn't cry, but something inside me unclenched, because the justice I wanted wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen. And now, for the first time in my life, the room that used to swallow me whole was finally choking on the truth. I didn't say a word, and for once I didn't need to. The room was frozen, not with shock, but with the uncomfortable weight of clarity, the kind that doesn't just land, it lingers. The folder sat in the middle of the table like a live wire. No one touched it. No one looked at Chloe. Not yet. All eyes were on me. For the first time in my life, they were really looking. Not past me, not through me, at me. Chloe laughed, a brittle, panicked sound. Okay, come on. This is ridiculous. You think she didn't set this up? Obviously, she planned this. She manipulated the whole thing. She probably wanted someone to dig. No one replied. She tried again. Louder this time. She's not a victim, you know. She's always been dramatic. Obsessed with being the underdog. Still nothing. She looked at Dad. Say something. He shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, but said nothing. I didn't look at her. I just looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. That was new. Chloe stood up, as if she could walk away from what was already on the table. This is insane, she muttered. You all are going to believe her now? After everything? Grandma's voice broke the silence. We believe what's in front of us. Her words were soft, but they cut through the room like glass. She turned to me, squeezed my hand. Her palm was warm, steady. I always knew you were telling the truth, she said. I just didn't know how much it cost you to do it alone. That's when Chloe's face truly cracked. Her mouth opened, ready to defend, deflect, destroy. But no one was listening anymore. They weren't turning on her. They were simply done. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even judgment. It was indifference. The kind that says, we saw you. And now we've seen her. For the rest of the dinner, no one brought up the folder. No one asked me to speak. They just let me sit in the space I had earned. The space I had once begged for. And I didn't need to fill it with anything but presence. Because silence, when it's yours, isn't empty. It's power. And I had finally stopped asking for permission to hold it. I left before the cake. No scene. No goodbye. Just stood up, kissed Grandma's cheek, and walked out into the cold evening air without looking back. My heels clicked against the sidewalk like punctuation. Firm, final, unapologetic. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to stay and explain myself. Let them slice cake in silence. Let them sit with the truth they tried so hard to bury. That was never my weight to carry. 3 days later, my mother called. Twice. Then again. When I didn't pick up, she texted, "Can we talk? I think we need to clear the air. I want to make things right." I stared at the screen for a full minute. I thought about the years I tried to earn that voice, that attention, that sentence, and how, now that I finally had it, it meant nothing. Not because I was angry, because I was done. I typed slowly. One message. Nothing more. You never believed in me until someone else told you to. Then I blocked the number. I didn't cry. I didn't feel proud either. Just clean. There's a grief that comes with letting go of hope, even the fragile, half-dead kind. But there's freedom too. I went home, lit a candle, and sat with the quiet like an old friend. Because when you've spent your whole life being doubted, overlooked, and picked apart, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is walk away without needing to be understood. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need closure from them. I had given it to myself the moment I stopped replying. And as the flame flickered beside me, I whispered one last thing into the dark. Goodbye doesn't always need an echo. The apartment smells like vanilla and cedar. My kind of quiet, my kind of clean. I slip off my boots, pour a glass of red wine, and drop my keys into the little ceramic dish I made in a beginner's pottery class last fall, the one that wobbles on the bottom but still holds everything just right. The windows cracked open. A city hum swells softly in background. No spotlight, no applause, just the life I built with bare hands and clear boundaries. I sit down at the desk where I launched my business, the same one I painted in soft sage and nicked with scissors during the first holiday rush, the same one Chloe probably thought didn't exist. My laptop dings, a new order, handwritten journal, custom inscription, gift wrapped. I smile, another stranger believing in something I made. Not because I begged them to, but because I created it well enough to speak for itself. I used to think validation had to be earned through performance. That success only mattered if it impressed the people who once doubted me. Not anymore. Real life doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to be lived. I take a slow sip of wine and stare out the window, the city lights reflecting in the glass like small constellations I no longer have to reach for. The world doesn't need to clap. It just needs to leave me whole. And as the night folds in quietly around me, I exhale. Not relief, not defiance, just peace. I am not the version of myself they remember. I am the version they'll never get the chance to know.